Shalom. All praises to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. With double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. May Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. Peace be bestowed unto your hopeful elect. I'm your brother Yahweh Call from Great Millstone, Orlando. I've got 3 videos here I want to run through. Some say this is the groundwork for another civil war. Some say this is pretty much going to be a Jim Crow 2.0, as this is from Esau. This isn't me saying this. This is from other Edomites saying this about how this is pretty much MAGA. You know, that whole movement trying to because they're losing at this point, you know. Esau's losing overall. Trump, as the scriptures say, and as Apostle Tahar said, believes, which a lot of us are under that same belief, Trump could very well be that cruel Lord that the scriptures talk about. But as the scriptures talk about the that taunting proverb, right? As America has become, and even more so Trump, as he's again losing and making desperate moves to again stay propped up as this great, the last great white hope. And again, even Esau, like I said, he's calling it out. You know, this move right here is not going to work. And according to prophecy, overall, whatever Esau does is not going to work overall. But even other MAGers are calling this out, that this move isn't going to work. So going into this, as I mentioned the other day, about this whole redistricting, which again, being that Trump is losing, and we're coming up to these midterm elections, which I believe they're in November, if I'm not mistaken. You know, Trump's got to do certain moves. He's got to make certain moves to again stay propped up in power. All right. He has to make desperate moves at that. Because this is just a straight up, get into these videos, man. This would be just a straight up power trip. You know, so again, that's why a lot of people are calling this the groundwork for a civil unrest, because this is going to cause more division. And Lord willing, you know, this is one of those things that, hey, it does cause division to where martial law has to be enacted, right? Because not only is America divided, but you got certain states. Of course, you got states divided within them, other states. But even within states, you have counties divided within themselves. Even within the states, certain counties are divided. So, Lord willing, this is just more fuel to the fire. I'm going to get into these videos, Lord willing, and copyright disclaimer, fair use. I'm not making any type of monetary gain. This is just for informational purposes. Lord willing, we get through this.
So primary elections are happening in Indiana and Ohio today, two states where redistricting has become a top issue, and they're not the only places where new voting maps could have an impact this midterm season. Joining us this morning is CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Good to see you.
How are you?
All right, so let's start with Louisiana. Explain that ruling from the Supreme Court on that landmark decision striking down the state's redrawn congressional map.
So the short answer to that, Vlad, is that Louisiana is going to end up redrawing its maps. And what I'm showing you here is the red and blue Republican voting districts and two, in this case, Democratic voting districts. But this is as a result of the VRA ruling. And what that means, the background here is that since the Voting Rights Act, the court previously has interpreted that to mean that when states draw their districts, they can't do so in a way that, in the judgment of those, in the courts, that might dilute the voting power of minority voters, including these states. So with this court ruling now, Louisiana is going to go back and they're going to redraw these districts. And the net here could be that both of these are majority minority districts, black voters here. This could go away. At least one of them could go away.
Also want to talk about Florida, right? Because the same day that ruling came down, Governor Ron DeSantis also signed into a redrawing of the congressional map. What's the latest there?
So I'm going to show you this. Florida in context, you mentioned at the top.
So, as I said, this is why some are calling this the Jim Crow 2.0. Because with this whole voting act, which basically gives minorities, basically, Jake, voting privileges and things of that nature. Esau's trying to do away with that, just to sum it up. And in light of this, well, as he's going to go into out here in Florida,
Top Indiana and Ohio. This is notable because, yes, the Republicans could gain a seat, maybe a few more out of Ohio due to their redistricting. Indiana did not. And yes, as some politicos have reported, that's drawn the ire in some respects of the White House. Florida now is moving to redraw its districts and try to net the Republicans now maybe 3, maybe 4 seats. The issue here is that this, as apart from the Voting Rights Act, I'm going to show you this because I want.
So, Trump called for these. Basically, he called for these Republicans for this, as far as these redistricting maps, right? And with that, like I said, just speaking from a spiritual lens, or looking at this with the spiritual lens, like I said, do away with Jake, so-called Negroes, Latinos, right? And again, as of recently, this guy out here in Florida, DeSantis, pretty much overnight drew up some law or whatever, which is illegal, by the way. It just goes to show you Esau, man. He's like I said, this is just a straight up power trip. It's a straight up, what's the word? This is just a straight up power trip, a power move. When you look into the whole gerrymandering, well, actually, let me not get ahead of myself.
I want to sort of explain what I mean by gerrymandering or redistricting. What happens is we've got, say, in this abstract, blue voters, red voters. If you draw districts where, say, for example, you take blue voters and you put them in a district where they're outnumbered by red, that's a Republican gerrymander, and you could do the opposite and say put a bunch of blue voters together with just a few red ones, and they're outnumbered as well. That's how this process works, and that is now, given the Supreme Court rulings, okay if it's partisan. And that's where that comes down, and that's one of the reasons you see all these districts and redistricting this cycle happening so much in all these states.
So then what kind of impact?
Just real quick, the definition of gerrymandering. It says gerrymandering is the practice of drawing electoral district boundaries in a way that deliberately favors a particular political party or group, often to manipulate electoral outcomes in its favor. So in this case, it would be the Republican side, which again, Trump, he called for all these Republicans pretty much to with this whole redistricting of these different states. And again, as a recent, Ron DeSantis out here in Florida, he's on board. All right, because this is what gerrymandering is. Is basically manipulating the sheets, so to say, the stat sheets for it to work in your favor. Basically they're trying to do away with the blue, the Democrats and whatnot.
Impact is this expected to have on the midterms more broadly?
So I'm going to go back to this map over here, and we're not done yet, again, given that VRA ruling. But what you've seen, we covered Texas and their redraw of the map. Maybe that nets Republicans some other states, North Carolina, and we just talked about Florida. The Democrats, quite famously, passed Prop 50. They might get a gain in California, some out of Virginia too. So that back and forth on the political axis here means that you see these gains, potential gains for each party. Bottom line here, this happens in part because, remember, voters tend to vote for the same party all the time. We talk a lot about swing voters, but the fact is that more than 90% of voters who are partisan are going to vote for their same party. Most Congress people get reelected when they run. So all of that, frankly, they can do this redistricting partly because those voters vote the same way every time.
And that's usually the case. Oftentimes, you will vote for the same, party, individual. But again, Trump, he's been losing. A lot of these MAGAs, they're not MAGA no more. So this is why, with this straight up power move, all right, this is a pretty much a dictatorship move. Because a lot of people that work for Trump, they're not with him. So again, as we're coming up upon these midterm elections, which the midterm elections is just pretty much because the presidential term is 4 years, and the midterm elections, man, they're just pretty much it's basically like a progress report of the president. See how he's doing. The talks of impeachment once again, already been coming up.
Makes it easier.
Yeah, but what happens, Anthony, when people who don't vote often, so who are not calculated or incorporated into these into polling and into statistics that we look at that give us a sense of how a race is going, what happens when they turn up at the polls?
Well, that could skew all of this. And I think the other part of this is there are assumptions made here. I'll take one example, Hispanic voters. A lot of them shifted toward the Republicans in 2024. In a lot of these districts, in Florida, in Texas, etc., the Republican lines kind of assume that those Hispanic voters are going to stay with the Republican Party. If they don't, to your point, all of these calculations might go the other way, it might backfire, and in the reverse with some demo groups for Democrats as well. Nothing is certain, that is for sure.
Yeah.
So this is why, again, this call to redistrict these maps, these redistricting maps, and again, Esau, he's just coming up with laws to to, and that's why this guy Ron DeSantis is catching flank, because ultimately it's shitting on the people's so-called rights, you know, and again, it just goes to show you that these people, they're still putting their trust in the system, especially you Israelites, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, man. All right, as we've been saying, your vote never mattered, you know. Your vote never mattered, but they're still going to trust in the perverseness. They're still going to put their trust in the shadow of Egypt. But I'm going to play this next video.
In case you haven't heard, in the wake of what Virginia did, which was in the wake of what Texas did, now Florida is talking about redistricting. There are some issues with their redistricting, so let me show you some footage here. Let me show you some content.
Florida Republicans are so desperate to gerrymander 4 more seats, and while they are really going out on a limb with this one, from the looks of the map, they're going to dilute some very red areas that have easily won Republican with enough blue voters that they're trying to gerrymander out of a different district to actually make a blue seat in a district like mine winnable. Let me explain, friends. So in terms of Florida, I live on the coast over here, right? Like right on the coast, all the way over. And that little blue dot to the west of me, that's Orlando. Except Orlando's a lot bigger than that tiny little blue dot. In fact, it makes up most of the middle of the state. If you've ever been to Orlando, you know that Orlando is an hour from Orlando because it takes you that long to get across the entire city. And now my district, right, me, 70 miles away from Orlando. It takes me an hour and change to get to Disney, right, which is like the other side of Orlando. But that little tiny blue district is touching my district, District 7, which has been a red district forever. But honey, if you give us just a little tiny bit of those blue voters that you're trying to take out of that area and shove over here, you're going to have a bad outcome, because now you've made District 7 very winnable for a Democrat, as well as District 6 to the north of me, currently represented by the most hated piece of shit in Congress, Randy Fine. And don't worry, the Republican running against him is just basically an anti-Semitic reality show, MAGA macho, red pill twat. Guys, you're making it too easy. And down there, down yonder, couple districts down from me, you got Bernard Taylor, who's getting national attention, running for Brian Mast's Congress seat. The same guy who wore the IDF uniform on the floor of Congress. Honey, Ron, are you trying to make it easy for us to win? Because while there looks like there's a whole lot of red on this map right now, honey, you know as good as they do, come November, it's gonna be all blue.
So for those of you who weren't maybe grasping what it is she was trying to explain, let me kind of re-examine what she said, okay? What they did was they took a big blue district and they chopped it up. And they said, we're going to take this section and we're going to put it in this red district. And we're going to take this section and we're going to put it in this red district. And we're going to take this section and we're going to put it in this red district. So they split up all the Democratic voters so there was only one small Democratic seat. However, by putting all of those Democrats in these various red districts, they may have put enough blue voters into those red districts to possibly flip those red districts. Yeah, they're red now, but you just made them a hell of a lot more purple by stuffing a bunch of Orlando blue voters in them. So they carved up the big blue district, or 2 of them, and put it into a bunch of all smaller, more redder districts. But in doing so, they may have created multiple winnable seats in the heart of Florida. I certainly hope that's the case. I hope that when the rubber hits the road, come election time, there are enough blue voters being shoved into all of these different red districts in the heart of Central Florida that when it's all said and done with, Democrats come away with even more seats. And don't forget, what Ron DeSantis is trying to do is against the law in Florida per the Florida voters not that long ago. Right. But we'll make another video on that.
So, Florida is just an example. Florida is just an example. And I'm just picturing it because if this example, what he just used, because this is happening throughout the states. So if this example, if this spreads like wildfire throughout the states, I could just picture the blowback. This will backfire big time. And again, Trump, man, this guy. Hey, Revelation 12:12. Knowing that he had but a short time coming down with that great wrath. And again, because Trump could very well be that cruel Lord, right? He could very well be the one to come down with that great wrath, man. And it's a play. It's a play on. It's a play on the people's minds because with this, they're bringing out this bitch, Kamala Harris, right? Basically a cry out. Bringing her out the tool shed to play on the people's emotions. But with that, I got this last video.
Donald Trump is underwater with every single demographic. Just to remind you, I'm not going to say the Republicans don't have a plan, but I am here to tell you that all of their plans suck. For example, a few days ago, I told you about that internal memo from a committee for the Senate Republicans. They said the Democrats were absolutely crushing them because 3 more states that they weren't expecting started trending toward a positive for the Democrats in polling. And they said if they don't do something very soon to change how the elections are run, the Democrats will crush the hell out of them. They said they needed to implement new measures that would make it harder for poor people to vote, which would actually only negatively affect the Republican voters, because the reason for that huge spread amongst those 3 states was from college-educated voters, not from a specifically poor demographic. But also, if you look at the recent Pew Research poll numbers, Donald Trump is underwater with every single demographic. To give you just a taste of the difference here, in 2024 during the exit polls, Donald Trump had about a 48% approval rating amongst Latinos, and now it's down about 26 points. He lost over a quarter of his approval rating amongst independent voters just 3 months into his new term. He's even underwater by 13 points among white voters. Even had a decent-sized Gen Z bump prior to the election, and now he's lost all of it, which is why Trump and the Republicans are trying so hard to gerrymander every single state. But it's not going to work for 2 specific reasons. One is because we saw just after they did that in Texas that they started losing in places in Texas that they won in 2024 by double digits. And they did that gerrymandering to help them based on Latino voters from 2024. But they have lost that support since then, as I showed you, which means they don't have any safe districts. The only way gerrymandering really works is if you have significant pockets where you have higher support so that you can gerrymander and cut some of that support out to include it with the Democratic chunks to drown them out. But as we've seen in this Texas gerrymandering, there are no safe districts for them. They can't pull voters away from certain places where they have a +10 advantage because they're losing by 20 points. Gerrymandering will not help you if you are losing every single district. But the second most important reason? This shit. Right here. In March, Florida's House district for Mar-a-Lago flipped from Republican to Democrat. But according to registration records before that election, Republican registrations in Florida were up on Democrats by several points, meaning more Republicans were registering to vote. And then this happens, it means Republicans voted for the Democratic candidate. And this is consistent with how Miami recently elected their first Democratic mayor in 30 years. Gerrymandering is kind of their Hail Mary here. Donald Trump's stupid executive order that he signed a few months ago that he said would do away with mail-in ballots and create a registry of all eligible voters, that is going to end up being blocked. There are dozens of lawsuits already filed against that. It is blatantly unconstitutional. Donald Trump cannot sign an executive order completely changing how the states run their elections. He's just trying to pass the SAVE Act by decree because Congress couldn't pass it. But if you remember this, and you remember what's going on in places like Texas and Louisiana, no matter what they try doing to redistrict and help themselves, it's not going to work because they don't have enough support in any district in any fucking state.
So, this great white last hope, hey, he's losing. So, Lord willing, hey, this man does act out dramatic. You know, he does some dramatic, something dramatic. Lord will, he does come down with that grab bath. Lord will, he does something. He does something major. Because again, man, how I picture this, you know, just playing it out of my mind, being that visionary, being able to foresee. Because like I said, even certain counties within the state, man, they're against one another. So, you know, hey, this could lead to martial law, man. Hey, states could secede from the union, just like it's been talked about for years, right? You know, he puts it in the movies. Bushwick comes to mind, right? You know, Bushwick was all about martial law, all hell breaking loose, because Texas succeeded from the Union. That's what Bushwick was all about. So, I mean, it's a very well possibility, you know. But I'm gonna grab this in Second Edges 13. Second Edges 13 and 31. Because as the scriptures say, a house divided against itself, hey, you know. Second Edges 13 and 31. And one shall undertake to fight against another. One city against another, one place against another, one people against another, and one realm against another. One realm against another. So again, this is why many are saying, you know, pretty much, man, this is the groundwork for another civil war. We know that at some point, these people, they're going to be at each other's throats. Right? Like it says in Second Edges. As a matter of fact, before I get Second Edges, I'm going to grab this Isaiah. Because again, damn, like I said, there are others calling this the Jim Crow 2.0. Because, you know, the whole thing about MAGA, right? Making America great again. You know, the time America was so-called great was when so-called Negroes and Latinos were in slavery. So this is why with this type of a move, a dictatorship move at that, you know, he's just saying to hell with you know, because again, a lot of this shit is illegal, you know. This shit with Ron DeSantis, the shit is illegal. So they're just saying to hell with what's on paper concerning the law, right? They're saying to hell with niggas and spics on top of that. But you best believe you're going to have dumbass niggas and spics out there if this goes down and they start protesting and whatnot, you're going to have dumbass niggas and spics and even dumber Israelites out there protesting, so-called prophesying. Isaiah 19 and 11. Surely the princes of Zoan are fools. The counsel of the wise counselors of Pharaoh is become brutish. How say ye unto Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? Because all this is just confusion, is going to lead to more confusion. And that's why people are going to, at some point, say the hell with it. Because these people that are propped up to speak on the behalf of the little guy, so to say, you know, the civilians. Well, when the civilians start to raise up, right? Verse 13, the princes of Zoan have become fools. And we've seen this, all right, from Trump. It says, the princes of North are deceived. They have also seduced Egypt, even they that are the stay of the tribes thereof. And again, Jake want to continue to put their trust in this system that's failing, is crumbling. But that's why when it goes down, Jake is going to go down with it. Second Ezra 15. So either way, man, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Of course, anything can happen between now and November. But in 2 Ezra 15, and Lord willing, this made sense. A good enough picture was made. 2 Ezra 15, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up to fight against another, and swords in their hands. Why is that? Because again, the princes of Zoan are fools. These people that are supposed to be on our behalf, well, hey, everyone's starting to wake up and realize, you know, these politicians, governors, mayors, so on and so forth, the presidents, right? But eventually it's going to get to a point where, hey, these people, they're going to say, the hell with these governors, mayors, politicians, and so on and so forth. And they're going to take matters into their own hands. You know, when this goes down, hey, these governors and mayors and politicians are going to start getting, kidnapped, ransomed, you know, all type of stuff, man. People are going to start taking matters into their own hands because they're tired of the bullshit, man. Everyone's tired. Everyone's jacked up, you know. And these people that are supposed to be on our behalf, they're not doing shit about it, but getting fed, you know. Their pockets are getting fat. They're eating good. Verse 16, for there shall be sedition among men and invading one another, and they shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So again, people are going to just start saying fuck it. They're just going to start saying fuck it. Like I said, man, these guys and gals, and we've been seeing it here and there over the years, but their little children, their wives or whatever, man, loved ones are going to start getting kidnapped, and so on and so forth. And what is it going to call for? Verse 17, a man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. Why? Martial law. And Esau, he's going to have to come down with that great wrath, and he's going to have to do what he do. So, you know, one thing is going to lead to another. This is just more fuel to the fire. So, like I said, man, of course, It's just a matter of sitting back and seeing how the Lord plays this out. But nevertheless, we are to stay on our watch. All right, so Lord willing, this was edifying. All praises to Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. Shalom to you, hopefully, like.